Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Engage podcast. I'm back with the scheduling committee, Ian Turner and Josh Cantrell, chairman, vice chairman. Gentlemen, thanks for being here and welcome back.
Thanks for having us, Ryan.
Yeah, glad to have you. It's been a few months since we've checked in. I'd like to say we're in the height of the summertime ops tempo and flying. We're recording this mid-June, June 16th. And so as we're in the middle of summer operations, I want to just get your take from your chair on the state of the operation, especially things like trip coverage and some of the challenges that pilots are seeing out on the line. So from the scheduling committee's perspective, how would you describe the current state of trip coverage? What's going on there?
I would say it's a mess. Nothing has really changed in the last 6 months in terms of M7 usage, which we see rampant, which used to never happen. It seems to be now that a little thunderstorm will put a multi-day wrinkle in the operation, and that never used to be the case. So it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah. And so it seems like it's not necessarily the trip coverage. There's some staffing issues going on, which is outside of the scope of this episode. Previous episodes with the MEC chairman have talked through, root causes of these symptoms. And really from the scheduling perspective, is trip coverage actually failing, or is it just simply taking longer than we're accustomed to seeing?
Well, I think what we're seeing is the byproduct of kind of some COVID drain in the operation. We have a lot of new faces over in the crew ops department. With that, they don't have the experience of the more seasoned schedulers that we had in the past. So oftentimes we see them starting trip coverage, they might get halfway through white slips and then they decide to no op the rotation, split it up into several different rotations, have to start coverage again on the 3 or 4 rotations they just built. And it takes the system a while to process all of that. We do see some dwell time happening between steps where they do complete the white slip step. They sit there for 15, 20, 30 minutes before beginning, the out of base white slip step. All these minor inefficiencies lead up to a total system that does not function well. And it takes a lot of foresight on the schedulers to know how to cover things properly, keep things moving, keep the sequence of trip coverage running without having it break down and create all these new rotations that just further bog down the system.
Yeah. And so these scheduling tools is largely, I guess, a management function of how they cover their trips. But there seems to be a lot of bottlenecks and like you mentioned, some delay time or dwell time. What else is going on? Is it technology? Obviously, we talked about staffing, the process itself. What are we missing from a pilot perspective?
Well, so on the scheduling committee side, we had a December 5th, 2025 ARCOS update that changed the way the award process works. As far as you used to have multiple award windows that would work in sequence. If you were eligible to be awarded 5 rotations, you'd receive 5 different award windows. The ARCOS technology update compressed all of those into one 12-minute award window. So it's, here's 12 minutes, here's 5 rotations, which one do you want? Part of that technology update, the company was supposed to program the automatic placement of that award onto the pilot line. So speed up the process to take the scheduler out of the loop. So whenever you hit acknowledge in ARCOS to acknowledge your award, there's still a scheduler that takes that rotation, places it on your line, hits the acknowledge button in ARCOS on the back end to say that they have put the schedule on your line to complete the ARCOS award process. The discussions with the company were that whenever this new ARCOS update happened, that we would work on automatic placement where the computer is doing that, a scheduler is not doing that. That was now 7 months ago. We have still yet to see them begin the initiative to program that in ARCOS and in an iCrew for the automatic placement. So you'll often see a quick slip that gets awarded. Pilot hits acknowledge, it gets awarded to them. 30 minutes later, 40 minutes later, it's still not on their line. The pilot's like, okay, well, I thought I was awarded that trip. They call into crew scheduling. They wait on the phone for 30 to 45 minutes to an hour sometimes. And then the scheduler decides that they wanted to move backwards in coverage, and they'll go actually assign that trip to a reserve pilot that they forgot about. So the whole process gets broken down. And then whenever we could have had, a butt in a seat, a guy hit acknowledge, the trip is automatically placed on their line. Now you create this churn that wastes multiple hours, and then the incorrect pilot flies the trip, which generates more pay. That's kind of a good snapshot of what we're seeing on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's an interesting look behind the curtain, so to speak, because, I think we've all noticed, I've noticed in particular, when you do hit acknowledge in ARCOS, it does take a little bit of time to get on your line, to the point where I'm like, well, I guess I didn't get it. And it's not in open time either. It just disappeared. But that makes sense.
So that process too, like the company, it was going to be end of year 2025. Then it was Q1 2026. Now Q2 2026. And I think we've slid all the way to Q3 now of the promise of that automatic placement on the pilot's line when they are awarded an ARCOS rotation.
I see. So a bit of a technology issue as well, and timeline there. So kind of creating that bottleneck. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk through the quote of pilots are clogging the system. And what I mean by that is, management has suggested that provisions like auto accept and auto acknowledge in ARCOS, out of base green slips and out of base white slips in particular, contribute to the delays of coverage, and that quote, pilots are clogging the system. Is that a fair assessment?
I wouldn't say it's a fair assessment. I would say it's an assessment. It is definitely happening in some cases, but I think we need more of a history lesson here of back in the day, there was batch sizes. The batch sizes went away, so auto accept came in, because the whole point of auto accept was for a pilot to say, hey, do not call me unless this is my rotation. And the company agreed with that. And so that's the premise we've been working on. They still have the ability to use batch sizes if they want, but they just choose to make it an unlimited batch size, which also kind of bogs the system down.
Yeah. And to that point, auto accept and auto acknowledge have really been a part of ARCOS since its inception. It was just, we weren't necessarily using it the same way that we are now. And it's totally in line. And like you said, yeah, you don't want to call at 2 a.m. and you're number 99 out of 100 in a batch size. So to avoid those nuisance calls, you turn on auto accept, and then the only phone call you get is if it's yours to take, and then you can acknowledge it. So that all makes sense. But yeah, it does take some time to go through that. What about out of base white slips? There's some contention there with, that quote bogging things down. They have to go through out of base white slips. The take rate, if you will, is almost zero. Talk to me about that. And a reminder for pilots, like these are all contractual tools that pilots have at their disposal. And there's no fault or no wrongdoing in using these tools, right?
Right. The out of base white slip is a contractual mechanism that allows a pilot to pick up a white slip out of base. And typically we would see that in the past. Let's say a New York pilot that lives in Atlanta wants to fly an Atlanta trip. So they put an out of base white slip in for that rotation. What we're seeing now is that more pilots are putting that slip in, but at the same time, they're not calling those pilots. They're using M7 to bypass those pilots.
I see. And that's where the provision 23M7 comes in. And we've talked heaps about that. And you can go back to other episodes, other podcast episodes specifically on 23M7 if you want the backdrop there. So the ability to skip steps of coverage allows scheduling to move on, bypass that pilot, pay protect them, and then move on to the next step.
Yeah. And Ryan, I'll hop in here real quick. I think we're seeing as well with as much of like the no-opping and splitting of rotations through all bases, doesn't matter the size of your category. Delta pilots like optionality, right? We might have a good trip just fall into our lap. And so you never know if you're a commuter and there's some deadhead out to an outstation somewhere, fly back the next morning with an out-of-base white slip or something, it might hit. And if you have that out-of-base white slip that falls right in your lap, of course, anyone would take that, where I can deviate deadhead, stay at home, and then just fly the next segment back the following morning. So the optionality that Delta pilots like to have, send me a good offer with a trip. It just kind of behooves people to keep slips in. And then with the way the company works, the trip coverage system, I have as many slips in as possible with the least interruption as possible, which is using that auto accept function.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, go ahead.
If you think about it, if the pilots did not have auto accept in, they could take 12 minutes in that offer window and then 12 minutes in that award window. So auto accept actually saves potentially 12 minutes per pilot.
two 12-minute windows. You've auto accepted and then it moves on. Okay. So let me ask you this. If every pilot stopped using these tools, these contractual provisions tomorrow, would the system suddenly be solved?
No, I think there is a piece of the puzzle is the length of time it takes to get through trip coverage. The other piece of the puzzle is the unprecedented amount of open time that Delta Airlines is generating right now. For the past 6+ months, we've been told essentially on a month-to-month basis, hey, this is the most average open time we've ever seen. Right? And that gets to deeper operational issues than pilots who might have auto accept on for out-of-base flight slips. That gets to maintenance reliability, to flight attendant reliability, all the late operations that cause misconnects, which drive reroutes, which then drives further open time, which drives schedulers to no op and split trips and create even more open time. Right? The system as a whole is less robust than it was back in 2015, 2016, 2017. So this is kind of the new normal at Delta. There's no indication on the company side that they expect their open time problem to go down. So we're dealing with levels of 500 plus trips or more is average to be covered on a daily basis.
So it's not necessarily a pilot clogging the system. Yeah. Is that a function of airline growth and route structure? Like those seem like some positive things, right? Which is a good thing for everybody. And that's what we want. But there are some operational challenges and hurdles to overcome there, right?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of multiple things because there's lots of tentacles. So yes, as Josh has said, the staffing of the crew schedulers are different than the way it used to be, but also network drives a lot of things that flight ops doesn't get a say in. And so that creates challenges for flight ops. But at the same time, flight ops didn't staff the airline. So that has also led to even more problems for us.
Right. And that all makes sense. And they are hiring at max rate, max capacity. And so that's happening in the background, but you can't create a pilot overnight. So there is a lag time there. I want to pivot to almost something that you brought up, but you talked about, the open time. We have 500 plus trips of uncovered open time, and, we have to cover that. And so management has pointed to a declining acceptance rate for premium flying. And so I want to ask you, from your perspective, is that accurate? Is that apples to apples? Is that good math? For example, I think they said, they're used to 37 to 40% acceptance rate of premium flying. And lately it's down to about 2%. And so what's the reality there? Are pilots just fatigued? Are they tired and saying, you know what, I'm going to spend time with my family and not take this green slip? Or is it the type of green slip opportunity that pilots are like, it's not even worth paying double for this trip? What's the backdrop there? And is it really pilots are just not picking up that much?
I think it's selective math. So if you remember, we implemented quick slips in March of 2026. We have this thing called the bin monitor report that's on the ALPA website that lists the total duty periods of assignments and green slips by month. And it goes back to 2020 and even further. The issue you see with the company saying that pilots aren't picking up as many green slips, that's just not true at all. If you look at February of 25 compared to February of 26, it was double the amount of assignments or green slips in 2026. So you'll see that number start to not double anymore starting in March, but that's because the quick slips came in. So yes, there are fewer green slips potentially, but there are far more inverse assignments and quick slips, which are also premium flying. So pilots are picking up premium flying at an unprecedented rate. It's just not an insane amount of green slips like it used to be before all these other tools were used.
Okay, that makes sense. So the metric changed, or the metric is measuring green slip acceptance rate, but they're often skipping green slip and going to other methods, and those don't count towards a premium take rate?
It counts toward a premium take rate, but the narrative they're using is green slip acceptance rate.
Okay. Because my thought there was, and pilots are kind of scratching their heads saying, like, I'm seeing codes in trip coverage that I've never seen before. And, every day it's out of base green slip number 2 and 3. inverse assignment with conflict. I mean, there's a lot of things that pilots are, geez, they're really digging deep to get these trips covered, but they are getting them covered. And so, yeah, it was just the question of, are pilots making different quality of life decisions after years of this high tempo, or, what's going on there? But it seems it's more of a math or analytic data situation and not so much that pilots are saying no.
Well, yes. And also, right, we're in an unprecedented environment where there is premium to go around for everyone multiple times. So if you're a pretty senior pilot and it's the beginning of the month, you're probably not going to take a one-day trip when you get called for a green slip. Whereas in the past, when premium flying was few and far between, you would take any green slip you got. So that's also leading to the decline in acceptance rates because pilots have the ability to be selective now.
Got it. That all makes sense. This is all really great information. And again, a look behind the curtain because there's a lot of challenges out there, a bit of confusion where pilots are like, what is happening? And so you've given a lot of color and a lot of explanation. So I appreciate that detail. What is the practical pilot takeaway from this episode? If you could sit down with every Delta pilot for 5 minutes and explain one thing that we misunderstand about scheduling or trip coverage, what do you want pilots to know?
That we're not the boogeyman.
And I think from our perspective as well, throwing the company a little bit of a bone. It's a tough job staffing crew ops over there with their dual qualified schedulers and trackers. And so they see a lot of churn. Their training department has to train up an entirely new person, right? And it takes 3-4 months to get them usable to even be in the job. And then another 6 to 12 months to make them good or better at their job. So the talent pool down there is less than what it used to be. I think individual schedulers are trying their best. They're just making a lot of mistakes along the way. And to know that it's not the individual schedule's fault if you are on the phone with them. We all make mistakes, but don't take that on one person. It is crew ops as a whole or Delta Flight Ops as a whole is just in a totally different environment than they used to be in, 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah. And that's a great point. We're all Delta employees. We all work together, treat each other with kindness. No name calling. Don't call us thieves and racketeers. And yeah, we are under a lot of pressure on all sides and the operation's under pressure and, we're growing and that's great, but treat each other with respect and kindness and just know that everybody's kind of fighting their own battle. Ian, what do you want pilots to know? What's keeping you up at night?
That's a great question, Ryan. I think Josh pretty much hit the nail on the head, but just also to reemphasize that pilots shouldn't change their behavior based on things management is saying. You have a contract. You can exercise your contractual rights. Don't be afraid to be selective.
Fair enough. I appreciate that. So yeah, pilots don't need to feel that pressure to change their behavior or change their habit. Do what works for you and know that you are backed by the scheduling committee, that they are working hard in the background and the foreground, pretty much everywhere. So, and you're knee deep in negotiations, which is another episode for another time, but you are definitely busy and your committee for sure is busy. So thank you both for being here. Thanks for taking the time. And for those listening, you can look forward to some further episodes and updates throughout the summer. We're going to talk about weird slips and quick slips and get an update there, some reserve pilot stuff, and some good things that pilots are going to want to know to kind of get through the summer as a summer survival guide. So Ian and Josh, thanks for being here. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform, and receive notifications when a new episode is available.